Well, if you like the Cal Berkeley Bears, you will recognize that song. And if you don't, you won't. But we're going to welcome you anyways. We want to say thank you for tuning in, everybody. This is 100 Yards of Football, and you're watching Take 5 with Steven Travers. And our guest today is someone that if you live in the San Francisco area over the past 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 years, you are well acquainted with Bruce Jenkins and what he was able to do at the San Francisco Chronicle for as many years as he was there. He was a local, he was a favorite, and he's one of those guys that came out of Berkeley, but he's a Southern California kid. We'll talk about that in just a second. Steven, thank you for bringing him on. Bruce is really a legend in his own time, a guy that has written about sports, big events, little events, everything in between, and has a flavor and an essence about him that you know as soon as you start reading that it's Bruce and it's his story. So thank you for bringing him on here today.
Thank you, Harper. And there's no question about it. I've known Bruce Jenkins for 25 years now. It's interesting how we met. Nobody else in the Bay Area was talking to Barry Bonds because they all hated Bonds and Bonds hated them. And I somehow was able to talk to Bonds because I was friends with Bonds's roommate at Arizona State, Charles Scott. And Bruce and Scott Osler and a couple of the other guys went up to McGowan and goes, "Who is this tall dude who's in the clubhouse talking to Bonds like he's played with him?" And McGowan goes, "Oh, yeah, he knows Charles Scott, who was his roommate." So it kind of started in the press box at Pac Bell Park. And later I wrote a Jim Murray book, and Bruce was very kind with his contribution to that. So yes, no question about it. Bruce Jenkins, in my opinion, is probably the best sports writer going today and has been for a quarter of a century. And I'm honored and pleased to have you, Bruce. Welcome to Take 5 with Steven Travers.
Thanks a lot, Steve. You know, I almost went to SC. I had two brothers who went there, older brothers from my dad's first marriage. And I took a recruiting trip up to Cal with a guy. They were recruiting him. I said, I think I'm just going to get out of Southern California. But I was targeting that journalism school.
I could see
it worked out quite nicely for you. Bruce, if you don't mind, we're going to talk a little bit of things from memory lane, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Some old school stuff. You mentioned you're from Southern California. I read that you're at Santa Monica High. Charlie Sheen went there, a lot of celebrity kids that were in that area. But you had mentioned before we went on the air that you really were a Malibu kid and you love surfing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You've written about surfing. You have a book regarding that. It's kind of a passion of yours. But you end up going to Santa Monica High at a time where in the mid to late 60s, gosh, there were so many things that were going on. Talk a little bit about that experience. And is there any teacher? Was there a book that you read? Was there a book report that you had to do? Was there an influence by your dad or your brothers? What got you into writing?
Well, first of all, I was very fortunate. There was no such thing as Malibu High when I was a kid or junior high. I rode a bus 27 miles and back every day for 6 years.
Wow.
Go to Lincoln Junior High and Santa Monica High. Greatest thing that ever could have happened to me. Because I came from a very white, wonderful atmosphere, but, kind of not really the real world. And Santa Monica High at that time, the ethnic mix at that school was absolutely great. I played sports. I'm in there where there were lots of black kids, Asian kids, Jewish kids, Mexican kids. I mean, a lot, not just two, but it was really rich in ethnicity. And that just helped me in so many ways in my growth, emotionally and spiritually. And when I got to Berkeley, it didn't seem all that different to me. It wasn't any kind of culture shock. There were other kinds of shock, but that wasn't one of them.
Well, the experience there, and you mentioned it was a 26-mile journey every day. Were you a bookworm? Would you occupy your time, or would you sleep on the bus? Were there certain memories that you would have that go to something that would inspire you to do and take advantage of the time rather than it take advantage of you?
I did as much homework as I could on the bus religiously. A lot of guys skipped school when the surf was good. I never did, but I did homework on the way home so I could get out on the waves, and maybe it was all done already. But my big influence that you mentioned, Jim Murray, happened to be a neighbor. Like my dad, he fled mainstream LA to get away, and in those days we were like 10 miles north of Malibu proper. We were almost at the Ventura County line. He was at Point Dume, Jim Murray, and we were at Trancas. And, I'm reading the LA Times, Jim Murray, and I devoured the LA Times, the LA Examiner, the Sporting News. I was a big sports fan. I learned early on that I wasn't going to be a musician. I could have been an okay one, but as I say, just good enough to be wretched by my family standards.
Yeah. Okay.
But next thing you know, I'm going to school with Jim Murray's kids in grade school. We did have a grade school, second grade on, and I'm with Tony Murray. He became my best friend. There's a shot of me and Jim in early 80s. But, you know, it was his kids. That was the connection. Next thing you know, though, I'm going up to the Murray house because, you know, Tony and I are having lunch up there. We're playing records, and Jim was in his office working. But, you know, that was my main influence. It wasn't like he sat down with me and said, "Okay, this is how you do it." He would just come out of the office to see if, you know, Bart Starr was playing Unitas, or Russell and
Right.
Chandler, or Palmer and Nicholas. He'd come out, and that was pretty priceless to watch a game with him. But just that fantastic influence. I really, it just locked me in that I wanted to be a sports writer. To think that I could write like him was comical, and that applies to everybody else who ever lived. But you know, pretty special. You know, sharpening my wit. You know, and learning the value of preparation and history, and he just was a master of all those things. So, you know, talk about a lucky kid. That was me in Malibu in the 60s.
Oh, without a doubt. Bruce, if you don't mind, I'd like to delve into that just a little bit. I mean, there's a couple areas you spoke about music, and we'll talk about your father, Gordon, in just a minute. Having met Jim Murray, when you would read an LA Times story that he did you look at it with a different flavor? Was there an atmosphere, or was there a understanding that you wanted to encompass? Did you work on your vocabulary? Go, gosh, I watched the same game that he did, but I didn't see it with the same flowers and the same arrangement and the order that he did, where he expresses it. Was there any part of that assisted or at least helped you in your desire as a writer?
Well, first of all, you can't become a humorist, which he was a master of that. Scott Ostler is a master humorist. Those are the only two I can really think of, Steve. And you can't be funny all of a sudden. I can be on occasion, but so that wasn't it. I don't study history to the point where I could even come up anywhere near Jim and his instant knowledge of historical significance as it applies to what he's writing about. But just I think the sarcasm that he approached things. And I did get a lot of that at the dinner table and watching sports on TV. You know, it's not. His sons, by the way, were the three most sarcastic kids who ever lived, and everything was awful and dreadful, and you know, and we just shredding everything, and you know, which I didn't take into the rest of my life, but it really affected my writing, where you know, not everything is wonderful. Things need to be, you know, taken apart a little bit, and you know, there was no one thing about Jim. If something really historic out, like Bobby Kennedy died, or you know, some big things, he was absolutely the one to write it. But if you need to make fun of somebody who is just a golfer, you know, or in horse racing, whatever, he was also that guy. And so I couldn't plug myself into being him really in any way except the way that I looked at life, the way I watched things. I got a big time edge in my own sense of humor, just day to day. And that's kind of what I took away from him the most. At the dinner table with the Murrays, when they were all together, there's a lot of tragedy in that family, but they would just take turns just like pleasantly shredding each other. And just everybody was funny. The daughter, Pam, was funny. Tony, Ted, and Rick were funny. Jim was funny. Jerry, his wife, was funny. I'm just almost on the floor, just laughing my head off with these people. And that was huge for me. I mean, I came from a very quiet, all my dinners were the same. They were great, but they were deathly quiet. All of a sudden I'm in this. And it got in there. I'll tell you that.
There's a form of writing or expression where you can be angry or not like the way things are doing, but it's not personal.
Yes.
Do you think that Jim had that magic to be able to criticize something, but yet not in a way where everyone was, hey, you shouldn't say something like that? It was authentic. It was worth noting, but it was also, it was less deadly, if you will. It wasn't as pungent. You know what I mean? Is there fairness in that? And did you learn anything from that in your ability to criticize people throughout your career?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I grew up in a climate of columnists. Well, just fire this guy, fire the manager, fire the general manager. He's horrible. Just fire him. And there's a great value in sarcasm, where you can say it another way, like, this doesn't seem to be working, you know. And I would never say fire somebody. I just really wouldn't. And sometimes I would clash. We had a columnist, Glenn Dickey, was firing everybody, and he wanted to run Joe Montana out of town and run Roger Craig out of town. And I just said, boy, that's never going to be me. I'm never going to be that kind of a columnist. Sarcasm is a wonderful touch if you really need to make a point. But that was a big point you bring up there, Harper. Huge in my development.
Well, I was in talk radio here in Atlanta for a little while, and we had a guy call, and he was so mad at the Falcons, and he wanted the coach fired, and he wanted all the players fired, and he eventually said, "We need to fire Arthur Blank, the owner." And I stopped him there. I go, "You got to back off, Skippy. There's no way we can't fire him too. We may want to, but it's going to take about $4 billion to replace him. So let's figure this out a different way." You said when you went to Santa Monica High, athletics were real important to you. Tell us about what you played and what you loved, and did you want to be a hockey player, play for the LA Kings at one point, or a horse racer? What were some of your dreams athletically as well?
Well, my big thing was basketball. I could really shoot a basketball. I wasn't any kind of player. I wasn't fast or could jump or anything, but in the gym, even with all the guys from all the neighborhood, nobody could beat me in a horse game. If I'm unguarded, I was really, really good, probably the best in the whole school.
There you go.
However, you swarm me with a good defender, and I check in with no points. I couldn't dribble that well. I wasn't that fast, and so I was barely on the B team. You know what I mean? I was off the bench. No kind of presence. I could always hit a baseball because we played hardball since I was like 8 years old, in the sand, in the street, in the schoolyard, and but the Santa Monica baseball team of Samo High was good. I mean, we're talking about 3,000 kids in the school, drawing from two neighborhoods, a very white and a very black neighborhood. And football, of course, no. I was a scrawny kid, and I was a really good swimmer and a really good body surfer. But all of a sudden, I'm up against a guy who just set like a national record. That was Samo High to me. So I got on the basketball team, and that was about it. And then I realized that you better start writing more about this stuff.
Did you join the school paper, or did you did you go to events and kind of write about it while you were there?
Oh yeah, I did that, and it's at Lincoln Junior High. The Lincoln Race Splitter. You guys, it's all I've ever done. Literally, I joined in the 8th grade. I joined the Lincoln High School, Junior High School Rail Splitter, and then the Samo High in high school, the Daily Cal, and the Chronicle. That's my career. Okay.
Well done. Did you ever run for school president, say, we'll have free lunch and an extra day off of school every year if you vote for me? Did you ever run for a board position?
I learned from my dad that politicians are phonies and liars, and which, of course, is not a blanket statement, but he thought so. And I absolutely not. That never crossed my mind to get up there. And I'll tell you one thing, there's no place for that here. No, not me.
Well, you mentioned the surfing, and you end up writing a book about it. When did surfing become a passion for you? Was that just what all the kids in the area were doing? Hey, let's go down to the water and get your board and let's go.
It was very, very solo. I grew up on Broad Beach Road, which in the early 50s, all through the 50s, was a very desolate place. There were very few houses next to ours. My dad bought a house, a Cape Cod kind of New England house, for like $25,000 on Broad Beach Road. And it was just fishermen and artists, and I knew maybe a couple other kids, but I was basically going into the water right out front. We lived on the sand. So I would burst out of my house and into the water, like, from the beginning, really. And that was, Broad Beach Road turned into the absolute opposite. It's now just, Jack Lemmon, Billy Wilder, Sylvester Stallone, Vincent Price, and it turned into that. 100%.
Yeah.
When I grew up, it was desolate, rural, and way out of Hollywood.
And then somebody discovered it. Next thing you know, you're not quite as alone anymore.
No, that's true. And I tended to go right out in front of my house, which was really a terrible surf spot, but the waves were sizable like everywhere else. And I never went. Here's a good example. The Malibu Point Break, Surfrider Beach, they call it, is one of the most famous breaks in the world. It's a beautiful right, and it's you can see it from the highway, and there's girls and all kinds of surfers and everything else. And never did I go out there. And of course, I didn't have a car for a while, but it was always, you'd get on a wave and there'd be 6 other people on it, and they're arguing and pushing and shoving. And I learned that that's definitely not for me. And I got pretty good at body surfing, and in 1974 January, I took the time to go over to Hawaii, the North Shore of Oahu, which is like the Mecca.
Oh.
I spent 6 weeks there, and I still go there. I've missed only 4 winters since 1973.
Wow.
Winter trips to the North Shore.
Yeah. And they've obviously with the storms and the rain, everything okay with where you go right now regarding Hawaii?
Really not okay. Just the road behind Waimea Bay, there's enormous boulders yesterday just falling onto it, and it's closed, and which would immediately shut you off from, if you wanted to go to Haleiwa town or Honolulu, you have to go all the way around the island the other way, and then all the way back, and flooding and people losing their houses and their pets, and it's just really bad. The worst they've ever had. They'll get it back, but I'm sure glad I'm not there now.
Yeah, the replacement and the cost, unbelievable. We wrote the book about it. If you don't mind, since Logan has it up right now, do you want to mention how that influenced, because you had a surfing background in California, ended up writing what you did and really acknowledging some of the best surfing in the world? I'm sure there's some in Australia that go, no, mate, it's down here. We've got it. But talk a little bit about that experience and how you end up writing the book. Yeah, well, by the mid '80s, I was really used to talking to really anyone. It's it's my job. I could go up to, Hank Aaron or Cal Ripken or Rick Barry or anybody, and just say, hey, you got a minute, right? And Pete Rose, you got a minute. And I was so in awe of the big wave riders on the North Shore and really all over the world, because I knew what it meant to be held under a big wave and think you're not going to come up. And for me, that's like 15 feet. And for these guys, it's like 50 feet of being submerged. And then as you're down there, another wave passes over you and you're thinking, I'm not going to get back up. The consequence of big wave riding was so heavy to me that I literally couldn't approach. I was so in awe of these guys that I just couldn't. It didn't occur to me to interview them. The Chronicle wouldn't be that interested. But then one night in 1986, during an especially big swell, I was staying in a little beachfront cottage right on the water, in front of the heaviest shore break really in the world. The waves would come over deep water, all of a sudden hit shallow water and break point blank on the water. Well, a wave came in that night and completely destroyed the house I was staying in. Just shattered it into little pieces. And that left my roommate, Rick Stevens, out in the parking lot. He rode his mattress into the parking lot on the surge of whitewater. Wow. And I woke up just, broken glass and wood and no bungalow left. And, it's not a big puzzle what happened, right? And, but all of a sudden I had something that I could share. And I could go up to Ken Bradshaw or Mark Cunningham and they go, that was you? Dude, that was friggin' heavy, man. That was you in that thing, and that was just kind of my entry point. And I started thinking, I can really do something here. I was there a couple months. I interviewed as many guys as I could, women too. And that book came out, and it's big wave surfers telling their stories. It's been very well received. It's still very relevant. A lot of them are still there, but I'm as proud of that as anything. And, but it took actually getting involved in the heaviness of the North Shore to launch that project. Well, I got a couple more questions before we go to Steven. One is, if we went to Malibu High, would their nickname back in those days be the Dudes? It has to be, right? You got to be the Dudes. The Tokers, the fighting Tokers. The Tokers or the Dudes, yeah, either one. The Token Dudes, I guess. Do me a favor, talk a little bit about Cal Berkeley. When you're done with high school, you end up going to Cal. How influential was that? You said you wrote for the paper there. Was it a different experience because you weren't playing sports anymore, but you wanted to be involved with it and kind of fine-tune your craft? Yeah, there was no question I wanted to be on the Daily Californian staff, which I did right away in my sophomore year. The first year, I'm just like scratching and clawing to stay in the university. I couldn't get into Cal now, but I'm on the Daily Cal, and next thing you know, it was the old Pac 8, Steve. You can't beat it. You can't beat the Pac 8. Cal might not have been very good, but we went to Army, we went to Michigan, we went to Washington. Lou Alcindor came in with the Bruins. We were national champs in gymnastics and great water polo, and it's fantastic. Just covering the Pac 8 sports was an incredibly rewarding thing in those days. It didn't matter whether you had Oregon or Washington State. It was all the same great experience. And that's I kind of immersed myself in that really and I started working for the sports information department. I would keep the stats on baseball.
and write the stories for the Daily Cal and do the public. There's a microphone right there. I did the PA batting second,
Yeah.
And that was that. Between that and studying, that was my life, and it really was all encompassing. I'm not an activist. I totally sympathetic to virtually everything that went down there, especially anti-war. But I'm not a sign-carrying screamer out there trying to make my point. That's just not my personality. And but I like I was in the right place. I was in a big school, great sports atmosphere. I like the climate, not necessarily with tear gas in your eyes, but
No. Well, Bruce, I've said on numerous occasions, and I was only a couple years old when this happened, but 1968 was one of the most trying times in American history. And part of the reason for that wasn't just because of the war, because of Republicans, Democrats, and voting and all that kind of stuff. There was a cultural difference where the dad who wore black horn-rimmed glasses, a white shirt with a black tie with a pocket protector, black shoes, black belt, black pants, black slacks, white socks. You know what I mean? The traditional guy going to work. And then his daughter is peace, love, long hair, tie-dye, and she can't stand him and he can't stand the way that she's living her life. There's a cultural and a family and a racial and a political and you name it. There is a division where everyone is saying, we don't think that way anymore. We want to do it differently. And you were a part of that in the college era. Please describe what that was like. And you're so close to where Haight-Ashbury and Free Love and Jefferson Starship and the Grateful Dead, you're just a stone's throw from that. And that's a cultural phenomenon that took place for a few years. And you're right there.
Yeah, it's really true. I was definitely immersed in it. Again, grateful. My dad was a very free thinker. He smoked a lot of weed in his day, and had played with every artist, every ethnicity under the sun, and was very liberal and loved that I was there. But at the same time, he wasn't a big activist either. He just dug what he did, and so I was never overwhelmed by the climate I was in. I wasn't deeply immersed in it. I was kind of at the shallow end of the pool covering water polo, if you want to talk about it that way. But
okay,
you know what I mean? Yeah. I loved the entire experience, and I knew a lot of fellow students who were getting big pressure from their parents. We made such a mistake. We had no idea you were going there. I even had a roommate, one of my best friends, who transferred right out and went to SC. From Southern California kid went back there, and that never occurred to me, but I loved it in my own way. I was going to be a sports writer, period. I wasn't going to be out there. Wasn't going to be a political activist or any of that stuff. I was going to be a sports writer. I'm covering the Pac-8, and I'm on my way.
Well, the Pac-8, San Francisco. You got the Warriors. You got the Giants. The A's, of course, are going to become amazing champions in their own way. The Raiders, the 49ers were great in the early 70s, and then they became great again in the 80s. All of this is a part of happening right before your very eyes, and you get to be just a stone's throw away from a lot of it. And Steven, I know you got a million questions, and I'm sorry I took so much of the first portion of the interview.
If I could just say one thing real quick, where I got mostly immersed in the music at that time.
Okay.
Whether it's over in San Francisco at the Fillmore or Keystone Berkeley, that's where I really connected, because I do know music. I know good from bad. And that was a priceless, perfect place to be at that time. Anyway, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, the Fillmore West, what an amazing place.
Yeah,
and all the great bands that recorded there. And
insane.
Amazing. Go right ahead, please.
Yeah.
Well, got so many observations I just want to make note of, Bruce. Let's start with Berkeley. You were there as a college student. I was there. I grew up on the Berkeley campus. Yeah. My entire family went to Cal. My uncle, Colonel Charles Travers, the room where the press conferences are held at Memorial Stadium is named after him.
Yeah.
And so I was at Memorial Stadium, Harmon Gym, and at Evans Diamond to see baseball, basketball, football, and track with my dad all during these years. And, I'm looking at the protests, and I'm smelling the tear gas, and I'm hearing all the sounds, and I'm in Golden Gate Park because my grandfather lived on Parnassus Avenue, and I'm seeing all this, but I'm seeing it through the eyes of a small child. And it was quite significantly different for me to see it, because in my mind, all I wanted was to be an athlete. And that meant discipline and a certain mindset, and it meant not being a hippie. Then you made note of the fact that you grew up in Malibu and went to Santa Monica. Well, I lived in Santa Monica in the 1970s, and it was exactly like it was in the 1960s. It was exactly as you described.
That's right.
Had some of my best friends were going to Pepperdine, so I was always in Malibu. I used to park my car in front of Bruce Jenner's house to go see Pepperdine Waves baseball games. My first girlfriend lived probably a mile or less from where you lived. She was at Point Dune.
Yeah, that's where the Murrays live. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I was at she lived in a trailer. Her
down by the river. Come on, Steven.
What's that?
She lived in a trailer down by the river?
No, but down by the ocean. And her roommate was the girl who played Bruce Willis's wife in The Last Boy Scout. And she wanted to become an actress. And I was hanging out with her when watching the World Series when Reggie Jackson moved his hip in the 78 World Series. But I wanted to get into Gordon Jenkins and his work as an orchestrator and arranger for the likes of Frank Sinatra. You mentioned, would you say My Way or September Song, which was
it was a very good year.
What a song.
Big hit. That song was written as an up-tempo. Well, my dad slowed it the hell down, if you can hear it in your head.
Yeah, it is slow.
No one would disagree with that. Genius stuff there.
Did he have anything to do with the lyrics? You know,
no.
Some girls living down the hall. It was
good lyrics, but
no, my years.
The lyrics were there, nice lyrics. That's what attracted him to the song in the first place, I think. But Sinatra wanted to do it, and they came up with Magic.
I mean, Sinatra's, is this in the 60s or the 50s that a lot of this is happening?
Yeah, they did 8 albums together in that vein, from the late 50s through into all the way to Trilogy, which is the late 70s. He used Nelson Riddle primarily for the up-tempo stuff and Set 'em Up Joe and all that stuff. And my dad was the Set 'em Up Joe guy. No, I Lost My Baby. It's a ballad. It's mournful strings. And Nelson Riddle, man, he'll get you going, you know, swinging right on into the night, you know. So he had those 2 great arrangers to work with, and he chose my dad for the mournful stuff because my dad wrote strings like a madman. So that was that.
I mean, you could argue, in my opinion, Sinatra improved in the 60s. There were 2 or 3 Sinatras. There was the original Bobby Soxer, and there was the Sinatra of the 50s. He became a different kind of singer in the 1960s and into the 70s, and some of his best hits were written in the mid to late 60s. So this is the period where your father was involved with him, correct?
Oh, no question. The album September My Years was 1965, which is a fantastic album, start to finish. But yeah, my dad always said that was the best work he ever did, which it was. You know, that it's just from his standpoint of arranging and conducting. But he also said, I think Frank was at his best also on that record date specifically, and throughout the 60s. And you're absolutely right. It's a different kind of guy. He lived a lot more, but not too old to where he's just reminiscing. You know, he's mid-50s is a perfect time to cut an album like that. And they both were there, 65. And, you know, it's so funny, you guys. I mean, the 60s, we think of so many things, but a lot of my life was my dad with a 40-piece orchestra and Sinatra in the studio. I sat in on one of those, and you talk about professionalism and not the Haight-Ashbury. Holy shit, man.
So did you get a chance to know Frank?
Well, I interviewed him for the book, which was very special. I was a kid. I mean, I wasn't gonna. There's no reason or time for me to approach him. My dad hung out with him a lot, and they'd be in Vegas and stuff. But I was just too young, and I did, but I if I'm going to write a book about my dad, I got to at least try to get Sinatra. And we knew his secretary, their secretary, this secretary, that. There's always one secretary that you got to get. And we knew her well. And I'm talking to her years and years. And she was always like, oh, yeah, he really wants to do this. We'll do this. He's just kind of busy right now. Well, he was busy for like 8 years. And finally, one day out of nowhere, she calls, can you be here at 4:00 in Beverly Hills? I said, yeah. I could have been in Vietnam and I wouldn't have been there by 4:00. And I bustled in there. I was ready. I mean, I knew what I wanted to talk about. And we sat down for an hour with a couple of cocktails in a private room. And he was just magnificent. You talk about a special time. I mean, all the interviews you do in life, and then there's that one.
Well, there's it's kind of like there's everybody else, and then there's Babe Ruth, and there's kind of everybody else, and then there's Frank Sinatra. I mean, he's the Babe Ruth of what he did, of music, movies, entertainment. I mean, Las Vegas owes itself to the likes of Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And just a cultural icon, and he knew everybody, and he made amazing changes in his life and in his associations. And obviously, the story of his relationship with the Kennedys and how that broke up. And, there was the post-Kennedy period of Sinatra's life. So, when he's writing these songs, you're hearing all these stories of this man's life and the associations he's had, and the ups and the downs. If you consider what it was like for him to feel like he's gotten JFK into the White House, and then they're gonna do clam bait at Bing Crosby's house after Frank has spent $100,000, secret servicing his place in Palm Springs for JFK and Bobby Kennedy to show up, and all that. These ideas and emotions come out in his music, and it's in the mournful sounds and the strings and all that. That's your dad. That's behind the scenes music that because the music behind Sinatra was as great as Sinatra.
Yeah, it's amazing. To this day, we still get a little bit of money, sometimes a surprising amount. He's been dead for 1 million years. Mm-hmm. So dead and so making money. And Sinatra is a big part of that. But, when I say he hung out with Sinatra, that's not entirely true. Usually after the record date, as he always said, if Frank made a left turn, I made a right. The next thing you know, you're out with Frank and somebody comes up and takes a swing at him. My wife loves you son of a, and the photographers are there. And my dad that was not my dad. He liked to, he loved it when he was gambling in Vegas. He's at the roulette wheel and Frank would tap him on the shoulder. How you doing? He goes, I'm losing my shirt over here, man. Stuff like that. That's an actual story that it was told, but he loved those. But he knew Sinatra. He just innately knew Sinatra. He'd had a lot of heartbreak. My dad he always called himself this world's saddest man. And he said Frank is also the world's saddest man for a lot of reasons. And when they got together to record, that was going to be the mood, and they nailed it, man.
Boy, did they ever. I mean, they nailed it as much as any musician, and I'm thinking jazz, soul, rock and roll, classic. I mean, gosh, there might be a few other songs pieces of music that I could think of, and maybe I have to go back to Mozart, but there's very few that compare. Now, we could talk about Old Blue Eyes till we're blue in the face, but your father also worked with Nat King Cole. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was an entirely different thing. My dad came out to Hollywood from New York to work for NBC Radio, and he heard about this guy, Nat Cole, and Nat Cole Trio, which was playing around L.A. By the way, one of the greatest piano players that there's ever been. I mean, just a masterful piano player. And he sang a little bit. Well, he can sing a little bit too. And my dad had a nationally syndicated show on NBC. There was East Coast, West Coast shows, and as big as you can get. And he said, well, we got to get Nat Cole on here. So he had Nat Cole on the air in the early 40s, and they did a bunch of albums together. And as opposed to Frank, who you never knew what kind of mood he'd been in, what kind of trouble he'd been in, whether he really prepared, and which he really didn't. Sinatra didn't read music, or he didn't really rehearse. He just thought about it for 2 weeks and then sang it. But he said, Nat Cole was the ultimate professional. He prepared. Everything was right on the money, never a cross word, and such a great guy. He was out at the house a few times, and after he passed, his wife Maria Cole and my mom were very close, and we kept it going that way. But you can't say enough great things about Nat Cole, except try to catch some stuff of the Nat Cole trio and realize what a great musician he really was.
Oh, no question. Did your father ever work with Joseph Zito, who was Barry Zito's father, and he was an arranger too?
Yeah, I got that question. Well, I did a piece on Barry where I went down to LA and at the house and talked extensively with Joe. They never did work together. Obviously, they knew each other, but my dad was he had his it was, I wouldn't say it's a niche because he did everything, but he was locked into his thing and Joe was into his thing. But great talking to Joe Zito. One thing, a fascinating thing from that interview episode was that Barry Zito does everything with his right hand, everything except throw a baseball.
Right.
And his dad was the influence there. Great guy, Joe Zito, really jovial guy, and loved life, loved Barry, what he was doing. And he said he passed away, too early, but yeah, we had a good connection.
Yeah, I knew Joe Zito quite well. I knew Roberta Zito quite well, and I was quite good friends with Barry for several years. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Jim Murray, and I want to make note of something. I don't know if you're aware of this. It was in my book, The Poet, The Life and Los Angeles Times of Jim Murray, which you were very influential in, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you talk about Murray and history, and Murray had an interesting event that happened early in his life, and it was very similar to Francis Ford Coppola, who is different from Jim Murray, but they're both creative geniuses. Both of them, when they were, I don't know, maybe 10 years old, maybe 11, somewhere in that area, they both came down with diseases. I'm not sure what it was, like the kind of childhood diseases that kids got in the 20s or in the 40s, In Coppola's case, God, he almost was paralyzed, and he sort of miraculously recovered. But they were both bedridden for about 10 months. Case of Jim Murray, this is what he did during that whole time. He read and he read and he read. He read every book he could get his hands on, and not just sports. He read about politics, and he read about history, and he wrote letters. And he started because he was a pen pal of famous people. He was writing letters. I'm probably butchering this guy's name, but I believe his name was Eamon de Calera. I believe he was the first prime minister of the Free State, the Orange State of Ireland, which came about after World War I, when the Protestant part of Ireland was freed from Great Britain. And they were exchanging letters. And he's exchanging letters with famous people and political figures and Hollywood movie stars.
Yeah.
And so this is where Jim Murray gets, started on this knowledge, because he's writing when his columns. I mean, I always remember the 1974 Harper, of course, talks about this all the time. The 1974 USC Notre Dame game. And Murray's column essentially was USC wasn't a football team yesterday. They were Patton's army moving through the Low Countries. I mean, that was how he wrote. And you're growing up with this kind of thing. Was he talking about history? Was he talking about the war? Were you hearing him at the dinner table? Or I think a lot of times, I think you told me once that you were really there a lot when there was a big game. A big boxing match or a Super Bowl or something like that. You never
Yeah.
wanted to miss that. Probably dinner was after that.
Yeah.
And so all these great Murrayisms are coming out of that. Where are you picking up on Jim Murray, the historian?
Well, I picked up on it, just from the columns. I mean, he wasn't making historical references to the mashed potatoes. I mean, it just didn't come up. I mean, like I say, he lived in his office. Virtually
a bungalow, right?
There was a nice little, side room across the little driveway, filled with books, and you couldn't get him out of there. I was there many times when he didn't come out, as he was getting the column done, or the next one, or the one after that. So it was all about, the big. Another thing I learned, you don't care too much if it's a golf tournament and the co-leaders are named Chad and Chip. If it's Nicklaus and Palmer, then let's turn it on. If people want to know about the big stars. Write about the people who are making a difference, and more than anything, write about the humanity. God, that's what I learned most from him, and Plasky too. He's actually used those words. Write about the humanity. Forget what the numbers, okay? Forget the data. What the hell? You got it. It means something. But I always forget about it as soon as I finished it. But if I read about the humanity and a great story about a person and stuff that happened, that'll stick with me for 40 years. And Jim was all about that. Yeah.
Jim was at Birmingham, Alabama when USC played the Crimson Tide in 1970, all-white team against an integrated team, and USC wins handily. His column, now he didn't write the headline. Bill Dwyer told me he had a headline guy, but it was a great headline. It was USC wins as Constitution ratified. But the column went on in that way. It was strike the bars and the stars and bars. The Constitution was ratified. America came together yesterday when a large group of white and black American citizens met in what might usually be called a violent demonstration in Birmingham, Alabama, and a riot did not break out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, that's the thing where when stuff like this was presented to Jim, he called upon his memory and all the books that he'd read and the stuff that was lodged in there. I mean, hell, now, if I want a historical reference, I just go to Google. Did that really happen? When did that happen? It's an unbelievable tool, which we never had. But Jim, he wouldn't have had much use for Google. He was his own Google. And, that's such a great example.
Well, that game came about largely because of Jim Murray. Because in 1961, Alabama had been invited to play in the Rose Bowl. There was a couple of years where the contract between the Big Ten and the Pac or Pacific Coast Conference at the time, I believe it was called, was not renewed for a year or two. And so Alabama came out, and Murray wrote scathingly, they should not be coming to Pasadena to play in the Rose Bowl. They don't play integrated teams. They are not integrated. They're not playing an integrated schedule. They shouldn't win national championships because to win a national championship, you needs to be a national game. Yeah. He wrote the same thing in '66 when he was a big reason Notre Dame was given the national championship in '66 instead of Alabama. So these factors played into Bear Bryant's mind when he was scheduling this game, and Bryant saw to it that he do an hour interview in person with Jim Murray and Murray's associate with the LA Times before the game in Birmingham in 1970. So his influence, he was a syndicated columnist. His influence was incredible just because of exactly what you said, the humanity. But he was not a liberal guy. He was actually quite conservative. He did not like Muhammad Ali, at least not in the beginning.
Didn't like Cassius Clay, that's for sure.
Yeah, he was Cassius Clay. He didn't like that. He was, I don't think it was the draft so much, but the big mouth thing, like
audacity, yeah.
He liked Frazier more. He was more of a quiet guy.
Yeah.
So, why don't you speak to that side of Jim Murray?
Yeah, well, he loved the understated greatness. Ben Hogan was his kind of guy.
Yeah.
Ben Hogan had been through an awful lot in life, and he could bore you to tears if he was one of those guys who pouring cocktails and this and that. He basically said nothing. He kind of limped out on the course and broke everybody's heart, and just the cold-hearted assassin that was Bill Russell, or just watching Bob Hayes come from behind and never lose a race. He loved deeds, unspoken, unamplified with bravado and boasting. That was his kind of athlete. And anytime somebody came up pounding their chest, Cassius Clay was the greatest example of that. I am the greatest. I mean, let's start with that. And I think everybody came around to him eventually because he was just so amazingly brilliant in the ring. But no, you're right. He didn't like the boat to be rocked necessarily. He liked a certain decorum in life and especially in sports. He loved interviewing Roberto Clemente, who he rarely spoke because he didn't speak really good English at the start, but just to be around him. I felt that one time I was in Pittsburgh in 1971 with the Santa Monica Evening Outlook, and the game was over, and I was just watching Roberto Clemente put on his shirt, a nice white shirt and a black tie, and just the regal presence of the guy. I get the chills just thinking about it. I didn't say anything to him. Just that's what Murray loved, and he could spot it.
Oh, did he ever?
Yeah. So you're such a good person to write that book, because you absolutely get Jim Murray. There's a lot to be, bad word, but gotten. I don't like that word, but a lot to be gotten. A lot to be got.
You mentioned you were good friends with his son, Tony. Now, and I believe you told me this. Tony was good enough to be a starting pitcher for the Cal Bears when you were there, and probably could have gone into the pros. And I believe Tom Lasorda offered him a contract, but for some reason he didn't sign.
Yeah.
He took a different direction. And was this some reaction to the father? Because there were tragedies in the family which we can amplify on.
Well, yeah. To sum up the tragedy, none of his kids could write at all. They could write, but they weren't going to be writers, and so right away it's tough. Now for me, I got into writing and not music, but these kids didn't really have an outlet. They had sports for a while, but Tony was a great athlete. Tony was the shining light. He's my age. We were best friends, roommates all through Cal. And he was a very good pitcher. He threw 90 miles an hour, which in those days was a hell of a thing for a college kid.
Still is. Yeah.
We had a game at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot near San Diego. Lasorda came somehow. He was there, and we all had dinner. Me and Jim and Tony and Tommy Lasorda. And I'm thinking, wow, this is too good. We're going to see him pitching for the Dodgers. But I watched the evolution. Well, that's not the right word. I watched the devolution or whatever of Tony Murray at Cal, from this great athlete, life of the party, funniest fucking guy you ever met in your life. Very, very funny. And we both agreed that we were the last drug-free senior class at Santa Monica High. Only these badass guys we didn't even know. They might have had a joint. Nobody really knew. None of our friends. The last drug-free senior class. And we got to Cal, and it's all over the place. And Tony and I agreed, we're not going to do it, man. Jenks, don't get into this. I go, oh, don't worry, Big Tone. We're not doing that. Well, of course we did. And we got into weed and Led Zeppelin and the headphones and Grace Slick and getting stoned on our asses and like everybody else. But Tony never got out of that. That became his life. He thought different things when he smoked weed. He didn't think family. He thought, I don't know what he thought, and then alcohol came into it. And we roomed together for 4 solid years. We both leaked into the 5th year to stay out of the war. But by that 5th year going in, I knew we weren't going to room together anymore, because he was down south of south of Shattuck, west of Shattuck, hanging out with lowlifes and bikers and and the worst people ever, just smoking weed and throwing down vodka or scotch or maybe both at the same time, and all kinds of blow. And he really, really went off the deep end. 6 foot, 180 chiseled guy who could run, jump, throw, and everything else. Weighed like 350.
Yeah.
His face was fat. And he died at 50. Couldn't save him. I always stayed in touch with him. We'd have a hardball game every year at Candlestick. I was the media team, but I always got Tony on my team because he could hit the hell out of the baseball. I saw him hit a 420-foot homer in Stanford one year. And Big Tone would waddle up to the plate, and he never, I just said, if he gets a hold of one, this is going to be cool. He never did. He got grounded back to the pitcher. But
you mentioned that both Gordon and Jim Murray moved their families from, call it LA proper, to the country, which was Malibu at that time.
Yeah.
And it was a shock for Jim. As he wrote about it in his own writings, one of the first things he discovers is that the house he bought had been where the rum runners had landed their prohibition booze in the 30s, 30s. And then he finds out that a lot of kids are smoking marijuana, which he disapproved of. And you mentioned your own father smoked weed. And Jim called together a meeting of the parents in Malibu to discuss this problem and how we're going to deal with it. And he was shocked to discover most of the kids were getting their drugs from their parents. That was the culture. Now, he had another son. We talked about Tony, but he had another son. This is very tragic. Ricky.
No, Ricky.
Baby in the family. And he ended up in drugs and died of an overdose. And what was just, he had a counselor or something like that who told Jim and Jerry Murray, don't worry about it. It's just a phase. It's just going to pass. And that counselor's son immolated himself in a drug daze on a high wire in Santa Monica or Malibu or something. So he couldn't take care of his own business. And so it's just incredible that you have people who are so successful and so in control of their lives, can't control their families. And that's what happened to Ricky Murray. And it was such a series of tragedies for Jim because his son died, then his wife passed away. And it's such a tragic situation.
And the oldest son, Ted Murray, who was he was the most bitter of them all. And we're talking about damn bitter now. He didn't care. He'd walk into. I remember that they were socializing, and he walked into the house. He's going like this. He'd written a song called "You've Got Turkey Shit on Your Teeth." Well, you got turkey shit on your teeth. Turkey shit on your teeth. He's doing this in front of a group of people. I mean, he really didn't give a shit. And all he wanted to do was play the guitar and get loaded and write songs like that. And it never amounted to anything. Jim got him a job at the Times, and like below the mailroom. I mean, and he stayed there for a while. And I kind of kept in touch with him, but yeah, I mean the whole and losing Jerry. I mean, come on, you can't. That's way piling on. And he wrote he managed to write about it so beautifully, Steve, as you well know.
Yes.
And I just felt like, God, this man, I mean, such power and he was so tested by and he so detested the culture that those kids were growing up in, as opposed to my dad. We would smoke weed in his studio after he wouldn't be in there. I'd be in there. My buddies were playing records and rolling joints and on this particular table. And one time, it was years later, I still had the table, and I turned it over on the underneath the table. He had written, "It was this way, officer," just as a joke. That's the difference between my dad and Jim.
Wow. Okay. Now, a subject, if you recall at the beginning of the show, we were playing the Cal band, and Cal sports is very near and dear to your heart. So let's talk a little bit Cal sports history. Now, we're going to get to Pete Newell, but, my dad played football and baseball and ran track at Cal.
Awesome.
He was with Sammy Chapman and the other kid, Vic Botard. Vic Botard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad was not out actually on the team, but he was on the freshman team that later actually won the last national championship. Cal has 4 national. Let's put it this way. Up until about 1960, you could argue that Cal sports was an equal of USC, pretty much really close. They had 4 national championships in football. They'd won a national title in basketball and almost a second. They'd won some track national titles. They'd won 2 or 3 baseball national titles.
Exactly.
And then what happens is the conference goes into the conference is just destroyed by recruiting scandals or payola scandals. Basically, Cal, Washington, USC, and UCLA. Stanford avoids it because they turned on everybody else. And when this happens, USC and UCLA sort of double down on, okay, we're going to make sports this big thing that's going to be the thing that defines our school. You get John Wooden's Bruins, you get John McKay's Trojans. Cal goes the other way. They become the 1960s, and they will go from being one of the great sports schools of all time to really falling apart. And unfortunately, this is when you're there. So how well did you know Cal sports history before you got there? And what's your,
not a lot. I was way into SC and UCLA. I was a huge fan of SC football, UCLA basketball right from the start. Goodrich and Walt Hazard, and knew a lot about the history there. I never thought I'd be going to Cal. It was a little distant. So only when I got there did I realize that I'm covering baseball. Well, these guys won 2 national titles, and it went to gymnastics and water polo and all across the board. They did all this stuff. I guess the biggest contrast would be, before I got there, Pete Newell won a national title and got right back to the Final Four. And when I'm there, he's the athletic director, overmatched by the rebellion, not knowing quite which way to turn. And here comes, Lou Alcindor and O.J. Simpson into the picture, and Cal's de-emphasizing sports. And I've often wondered if anybody was reading my sports material at that time, because so that's just, and meanwhile, Pete Newell, before John Wooden started recruiting who he did, won his last 8 games against Wooden. 8-0 went out against Wooden at UCLA. That's where we were then. And look where we are now. And you couldn't replace Pete Newell as a coach, but Rennie Herrerius, who did, was a wonderful man, but he was also gravely overmatched. And then they brought in Jim Padgett, who could recruit the hell out of it, the community, but couldn't coach a lick. And just, but so that, to me, Cal football was sort of a fun, ongoing tragedy. And the football thing, to this day, remember the Miami game last year? The Cal Miami, the game day is in Berkeley. This is the thing in itself.
Yeah.
The night before, the campus is swarming. At midnight, the next day, oh my God, it's the greatest football atmosphere you've ever seen. This is Cal. This is so great. I can't believe it. And they're up like big in the 4th quarter.
Oh yeah.
Well, they lost the game, Steve. They lost. You can't lose that game. But it was as we say, it never ends well with Cal football. We've been saying that for years since I was going there. It's still true.
Yeah. I mean, all I can remember I'm talking being 5, 6, 7 years old at Memorial Stadium and sitting next to my father. Oh no! Oh, swearing and oh Christ, no! Oh, or listening to the radio, and they'd be playing Michigan or they'd be playing US. I can remember. By this time I know the game, and I'm 11, I believe, 12, 1971. Here come the Trojans, and Cal gets the ball. They drive down the field, and they're at the 2-yard line with a 1st and goal. And my dad's going, let's go, let us get it in there. And they fumble, and SC recovers. And Sam Bam Cunningham pretty much gains 98 yards on his own and scores. And it's 28-0. And my dad's going, that's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Here we go again. That was Cal football. Yeah, it was. But Pete Newell, you're absolutely right. An incredible figure, a child actor who grew up with what's his name? Coogan.
Jackie Coogan.
Jackie Coogan.
They had him in Jackie Coogan movies. And his mom,
haircut like Jackie
yeah,
Coogan.
yeah, Jackie Coogan haircut.
And he looked like a movie star.
He was a very good-looking man.
Very handsome, tall, great baseball player. Great all-around Southern California guy.
Yes, and scrapper from not a great part of LA. And
well, you wrote, I really think, one of the best books I ever read. This is A Good Man. Pete Newell's story came out, I think, in 1999. You wrote it, and I'll never forget. You were so kind. I think I saw it on Amazon, and I emailed you, and I said, "Boy, I hadn't realized you'd written a book about Pete Newell." Next thing I knew, it was in the mail. And I never forget what you wrote. Dear Steve, this might provide a spark. Signed, Bruce Jenkins. God bless you and thank you. But it was one of the best biographies of a sports figure or any figure that I've ever read. It was a deep dive into what made Newell great. He was analytics and Moneyball before Moneyball in many ways, and he sure knew how to get to John Wooden, that's for sure.
Yeah, they had a famous game, or I think it was what started the 8-0 streak. They both guys had teams with guys in really good shape. Cal's players used to run this Strawberry Hill. They run up Strawberry Hill. They're absolutely dying, but you got to get there. You got to get there. Both teams in great shape. So it gets to be about 4 minutes left, and neither guy has called a timeout. And is a TV timeout. And Wooden noticed one of his guys had his hands on his knees. He's clearly tired, and Wooden called a timeout. And it's like, you know what? We never lost to Wooden again.
That's right.
I mean, we beat Wooden every time since then. Excuse me. Yeah, he never beat us after that. That started the 8-0 run because they just believed that they were better than Wooden. And when I interviewed Bobby Knight, he's like, well, John Wooden was okay. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. He'll tell you the two best coaches were Fred Taylor of Ohio State and Pete Newell of Cal.
And Fred Taylor won the national title against Pete using some of Pete's tenets that Pete taught him quite freely in the offseason.
It doesn't hurt that you've got John Havlicek, Jerry Lucas, and Larry Siegfried in your lineup.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Okay, well, Harper, I've taken up a lot of time. I'm sure you have some observations. I'm actually going to go to the restroom real quick. So why don't you talk to Bruce?
It's right down the hall to the left.
That's right. There's a bathroom on the right. We'll go with a little Creedence Clearwater with there.
Yeah,
thank you for filling me in on a lot of things. What I'd like to do is just how'd you start with the Chronicle? You're done at Cal Berkeley and you're looking for a job and you found one and it turned out to be the right one at the right time for you. If I'm not mistaken, was it the luck of the draw? Tell me how that process worked for you.
Well, the first step was I wanted to move back to Southern California, and I got a job at the Santa Monica Evening Outlook. This is the natural progression that you make, especially in those days. You start in small paper covering high school, etc. And it was a good afternoon paper, daily. And I worked there for a couple of years and got a chance to travel with the Dodgers a little bit and covered the Kings. And you got a good taste of big league coverage. But the sports editor there was a roaring drunk. He really was. He'd go out for dinner and you wouldn't see him again. One time he went out for dinner and I wasn't much for laying out pages, but he was obviously not going to write his column. So I filled his column with an enormous shot of Nolan Ryan just standing there. It kind of, I think I wanted to make him look bad anyway, but I quit, or he fired me. I forget what it was. One of them, we were both over it. I was over him. I was over sports writing. I was over everything. And the next couple of years, I just spent traveling around the country and then Europe in a VW van with my best friend, Jack Pritchett. He was in the Crossroads too. His dad was a was a lawyer, a realtor, and he wanted to go into law, but he wound up becoming the best realtor in Malibu, certainly the coolest and one of the most successful realtors in Malibu, Jack Pritchett Realty. And I, out of nowhere, after a couple of years of this vagabond, dope-smoking lifestyle, got a call from Al Moss, who I remember having covered Cal Sports for the Chronicle. He goes, "We need a vacation replacement." This is 1973. And what do you think? You can get back in the game. It's not the Outlook, it's the Chronicle. And I loved the Chronicle, especially then. Oh my God. And I said, yeah, I will do that. So then that's how I got it. Seemed almost accidental. I think I would have gotten back in it eventually, but I needed that trigger. So, Jack became this incredible realtor, and I got this career. And 50 years later, we're both in the same place. Amazing how that worked out, but obviously no regrets. And I worked as a vacation replacement for two or 3 years, just 8 months a year, working the desk. I didn't write almost a word till the late 70s.
Do me a favor, Bruce. Talk about the importance of newspapers back in that era. I won't call it the golden era, but there's certainly only a small fraction of papers that have remained out of that. You mentioned the Santa Monica paper. There's obviously the LA Times. I lived in the San Fernando Valley, so my parents would call it the LA Valley Daily Disappointment, right? The papers that were all over the place. The importance of just starting at the beginning, whether it be covering high school, just do your best, enjoy the experience, make these kids feel like $1 million, and they're going to give you, or their coach is going to give you a great line or two, and somebody's going to read it. Next thing you know, someone from the Chronicle is giving you a call. Tell me what that process was like for you.
Oh man, in those days, the Santa Monica was just one of the papers, like you mentioned, the Valley, the Long Beach had a paper, a couple others. I think there are a lot of places you could go and
the Herald, yeah, right, absolutely.
The Herald, a great sports section. Yeah, Alan Malibu, notes on a scorecard. And just so it was a wide open field. It seemed like almost unlimited. Maybe I will wind up at the Examiner. That wouldn't be bad. I'll go anywhere. And I'd go to New York. I'd get the Times. I'd get the Post. I'd get the Daily News. I'd get Newsday every single time without fail. Any town I was in, I got everything I could find. My best part was an East Coast newsstand that had Boston and Philly and Washington, and I just get all of them and get just the sports sections. Oh my God, I'd go to London, I'd get 10 papers a day, 5 of them respectable, 5 of them, tits on page 2. I mean, I'd get them all. And it's so not happening today. I mean, the Chronicle is shrinking possibly into oblivion right as we speak.
Yeah.
And the Washington Post is done. They unloaded the best sports department in the country. Steve, how can that even happen? It's the best sports department in the country for years.
You say the Boston Globe?
Boston Globe is downsizing a lot. Hell,
I was told, because I fly in and out of Boston all the time, and I always pick up a Boston Globe, and I read it, and I'm not very impressed. I know it was a great paper. It goes back to the days of Williams, Carl Yastrzemski, but my friend Terry Mark says, no, you got to get the Sunday Globe. He said the Sunday Globe is still high quality. And I don't know if I've done that. I guess you can look at it online. I read the LA Times online. It takes me 5 minutes. It's just, the LA
Times. Exactly.
One of the things about you, and I read you right from the beginning because I'm growing up in Marin County, and I'm reading I'm reading the Chronicle and the Examiner every day.
Absolutely.
We're having the Chronicle delivered in the morning, and my father, who worked in the city, is picking up the Examiner, and he's bringing it home, and I'm reading that as soon as he brings it home. Al Corona would write about, like, my high school team was made famous because Al Corona really covered prep sports, and the Examiner, the Chronicle at that time did not. But what I remember about you, Bruce, is the Chronicle really was San Francisco heavy.
Yes,
sir. You were writing about East Bay teams, and they were great teams. And it was like, well, you should be, because it's the A's and the Raiders and the Warriors, and they're doing a lot better than the 49ers or the Giants. at that time, and you're writing about Cal. You kind of, did someone say, "Hey, you're the East Bay guy," or that sort of take it upon yourself? Just that your interest?
It was tough to get a beat. I mean, like I say, I worked on the desk for mostly the desk for like 7 years, and everybody on the desk was old, and all the beat writers were old. Bob Stevens and Darrell Wilson, and everybody'd been there a million years. They're going to be there another million years, and finally, the A's beat came open in 1980, but especially 1981. All of a sudden, I'm covering Billy Martin, which was a better story than the Giants. And I was lucky to get my gamer on the front page. It'd be like down, single column, Giants up here, whatever they did, and I'm down here with what was the best story of the Times. Billy Ball was really happening, But yeah, but I sort of fell into that. I would have loved to be a provincial San Franciscan, just like all of our Herb Cain and Art Hoppy and Stanton Delplane and everybody else, and Art Rosenbaum. That was the tradition. I loved the San Francisco, and we'll meet at Trader Vic's, and that'll be it, But I was an East Bay guy from the Berkeley days. I did cover the A's for several years, and then the Warriors. Good Lord, they were so fun to cover, and the Raiders. I didn't cover the Raiders, but man, I just loved the whole. Just the villainous roguery of it all, and John Madden, and I don't think you could play on that team unless you'd been in jail, preferably that morning. And I loved everything about the distinct flavor of the East Bay, and so I mean I look back on it with equal, the memories are the same. I'd covered the Giants all 3 titles. I was in this park when they won all 3, and when I covered the Warriors, I was in the stadium for that too. And it's all one big glorious thing. I don't think I was either one, as it turned out.
Well, you and I are a few years apart, but I think we're pretty much out of the same era in this respect. And I want to let's call it 1962 to 1994. Okay. I don't believe there's been any geographical section of the United States that had greater sports than the state of California during this period of time, whether it's Northern or Southern California. It's between the Trojans and the Bruins, the A's, the Warriors, the Lakers, the Rams, UCLA basketball, you name it. I mean, what a potpourri of great sports for you to write about. And you were not afraid to write about Los Angeles because you were from there, and you would talk about Dodgers. And I can remember editors saying to me in the short time that I was working for the Examiner, after you were at the Chronicle, it was the late 90s, early 2000s, "Oh, you write about LA too much." And I'm like, well, Jim Murray wrote about whatever he thought was good. I don't care whether it's geographical. I'll write what I think is interesting, and that's what I think you did as well.
Well, I was trying to write about, what's the story, and I loved writing about the whole league, how the league looked against the Giants or the Warriors at that particular time, and they're generally really good about it. There were times when I'd hear from readers saying, "That's too much LA," but they were reading it, because it was the Dodgers and this is the Lakers, and that was what was happening, and I just felt I never felt any compunction about doing that. Just write the story, write what's going on, but as you mentioned that, I can't imagine anyone challenging that claim. I mean, even the San Diego Chargers were an incredibly exciting team. They never quite crossed the threshold, but John Hadle, Lance Allworth, and Dan Faust and John Jefferson. Give me a break. I mean, it's a. I don't think anyone can challenge that claim.
You mentioned the Raiders. I'm going to tell a real quick story, and you tell me if there was any truth to this. The young Bobby Moore out of University of Oregon, right? Ahmad Rashad. His first year in the league was with the St. Louis Cardinals back when Don Coryell was the head coach. And he required for games that you be wearing a red Cardinal-related color, either as a tie or a jacket or a shirt with a white tie. You had to wear a coat and tie. And so here come the St. Louis Cardinals. They pull in, and they're right about at the gate where you have to enter the stadium at Oakland Alameda. And they get off the bus, and Bobby says, Ahmad says, "We look like Carnation ice cream guys. We look like the vendors getting off the bus with our red and white striped. And we look out in the parking lot, and there's guys with boots and Levi's and Harley Davidsons and girls wearing with tight jeans and with white tank top, tank tops, and they're all smoking out in the parking lot, getting ready for the game." Yeah. He goes, "We knew we didn't have a chance to win the game before we even got in the locker room." And I thought that was just pretty funny. And you got to see this up close and personal. Even though you didn't cover the Raiders, you were right in their backyard.
That sounds like Coryell, and it sounds like the Raiders. I'm not sure about Bobby Moore, but yeah, I mean, the thing about the East Bay, it was just so real. It doesn't get any more real than the Raiders. And that's the neighborhoods, man. The people at home watching this team, that was their life. They're not making a whole lot of money. They're gathered around a table and they're smoking weed and they're drinking beer and they're laughing their heads off. And the Raiders are going to kick somebody's ass. And it's just unbelievable that the Warrior games were played to the backdrop of marijuana scent from the hallways. Oh, yeah. It wasn't overbearing, but damn it, and it was allowed. I'm not saying this is a Valhalla or anything, but I mean, it was extremely real, and the A's were about as real as it gets too. With Billy Martin, I mean, my goodness, he was a man from the streets and acted like it a lot. But God, that was my first full year on the beat, and I did it so many years after. But always the most interesting and most rewarding was covering him. Unfortunately, he never actually got behind bars, which helps. We had to walk kind of a thin line there, Steve. We just decided he's going to do a lot of shit. If it's not in the police blotter, we're going to let some of this stuff go. It's okay. He's Billy Martin. They're leading the division. Just let it go. And we did a lot of the time.
Well, let's put it this way. When I was a player in the Oakland A's organization in spring training in Phoenix, Arizona, my first day, I believe it was Jim Perry, Gaylord's brother, who was like a roving pitching coach, gives me a piece of paper with a bunch of names on it. I go, "What's this?" And he goes, "These are all the bars and restaurants where Billy Martin goes. You're not allowed to go to any of them because he gets in fights with his players." So
yeah,
that's everything you need to know about Billy Martin.
Yeah, I remember one time they were in the same room, and I heard him screaming across the room to Mike Heath, calling him the worst names ever. I'm thinking, oh man, this is so ugly, that's as opposed to Don Nelson, who would always drink in the hotel bar. You knew where to find him. You'd go down there, you'd sit next to him. There'd be 4 or 5 of us laughing and scratching about whatever, even if they lost. Just an uproariously fun guy, just covering the spectrum there. And when the Haas family owned the A's, they were so great. They were so liberal and so understanding, so getting the East Bay, the fan base, what made people excited, and packing the house, by the way, as opposed to the devastation of the last days there. But really, really good times. And as I say, the real world stuff is always a good education for a writer, wherever it comes from.
I'm looking at the years that you sort of matriculate into the business. You get out of Cal, I'm saying 1968, 69.
71, actually.
Well, you go to the Santa Monica Outlook, which was a really nice little paper. I like that.
Very much so, yeah.
Because I lived in Santa Monica, I read it.
Yeah.
Then the Chronicle. This is the era, and you mentioned the Raiders and what a story they were and how they were part of the neighborhood. So this reminds me of a guy, and I wrote a history of the Raiders, and my favorite chapter, it was a chapter about Hunter S. Thompson. And Hunter S. Thompson immersed himself in the stories that he wrote about, and this was known as new journalism, in which writers would write about, they put themselves in the story.
Yeah.
Tom Wolfe going down to hanging out with Ken Kesey, or it could be Hunter Thompson with the Hells Angels or the Raiders, or it could be, someone writing about the swing scene. Who was that guy? The great writer, Italian-American writer in New York. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And you mentioned that you were so into surfing and you immersed yourself in that world. And I think that was a very personal book. How influential was this new journalism that comes up in the late 60s? Norman Mailer's part of it, all these great writers. How immersive was that in your influence?
In terms of surfing?
No, in terms of writing.
Oh, well, the main thing I got wasn't so much those people who I deeply admired, but Peter Gammons of the Boston Globe began writing game stories that were not game stories. They were tales, and there was some opinion in there. And I got on that real early. I was doing that when I first started out, and it's different. It's not. And then he grounded out the second, and it's stories about people, and it was pretty radical at the time, and very few people could do it. They were a lot of the beat writers on the scene all over the country were these really nice guys who knew the game, but they didn't think like that. They just wanted to get the story out there as factually as they could. Wouldn't occur to them to really interpret or what does this mean, but Gammons was such a master. We always talk about all these people: Sinatra, Jim Murray. Peter Gammons is one of those people who totally revolutionized baseball writing. And he talked about the Sunday Globe. He had a notes column that really the first notes column where he wrote about everything under the sun, the whole scene. And but when I reading about Norman Mailer or Jimmy Breslin, that was a different world for me. But I just for them, they were invading the delicate territory. They're putting themselves in with the bikers or thugs, mafia, whatever, and writing about that's delicate stuff. You better be tough. You better be ready for anything. And that wasn't me. I mean, but I was trying to bring life to a baseball game, a basketball game, or something like that. And that's, I think I did it okay. But I mean, it's a different kind of thing.
I'll say one other story, and then I'll swing it back to you, Harper. And this is a Jim Murray story. And this was been told to me by Bill Dwyer, who was Jim Murray's editor with the LA Times. It's one of the greatest stories I've ever heard. I don't know if you ever heard it. It's 1987 Super Bowl. New York Giants are playing the Denver Broncos. Dwyer has what he calls an unlimited budget from Otis Chandler to cover anything, whether it's the Olympics or the Super Bowl, and it was the heyday of LA sports. So he's got his whole staff this is at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Jim Murray's there. He hires a guy, a novelist named Leon Uris, who was an acclaimed novelist who wrote Exodus, which was the story of the birth of Israel as a state. Great novel. But he pays him like 10 grand to go to the Rose Bowl and just write about what he sees.
Yeah.
New journalism, my experience, the smells, what the players sound like from like a European perspective, from an intellectual perspective. Well, he sits there, the game ends, Murray, Scott Oster, Malamud, all these guys. You were probably in that press box for all I know. Uris sits there, and finally Dwyer comes by and Leon, what's going on? And he says to Dwyer, "You SOB, you sat me next to Jim Murray, and he wrote, it takes me 7 years to write these novels," and he just pounded out this magnificent story about the green plains of the Pasadena Rose Bowl. And, he couldn't write a word. Dwyer had to finish it and send it in. But, I could just picture that Murray, how Murray, and
that's perfect.
Pound it right out, and everybody else,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to take Jim Murray's influence that you get from reading him all those years to actually making some of it in your own copy. That you talk about, the influence was there for me, but I just think it made me a lot better at what I could do with material that most other people weren't doing. That's where, because those guys and women wrote with a freedom, and they wrote critically if they had to. Maybe they invaded territory that hadn't been really approached, but they were fearless, and it's just, you're not going to be that influential, but it does work on you, and it makes you expand a little bit and grow.
Well, Osler told me that he purposely steered away from writing like Murray because he didn't want to be ostentatious. I personally said to him, I think you had the talent to do it. I think he had the irony and the sarcasm naturally. I have occasionally, used these kinds of sentences. I don't want to go overboard, but occasionally I can't help myself. But that's Jim Murray.
Yeah, I found myself writing a passage that sounded a lot like the Murray's dinner table, but it creeps in there. Yeah, you mentioned Osler. He didn't want to write like Jim Murray, but he did have a natural wit about him, and he wrote a column, a humor column on that scale, not to where people in Cincinnati couldn't wait to pick up Jim Murray, but he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, Osler was funny like pretty much every day.
Yeah.
I don't know. And he's such a quiet guy. He's not a great storyteller in person. Very quiet and humble. And geez, the stuff was just hilarious stuff. And he basically retired from the Chronicle, but he's going to keep working. The Chronicle suddenly is not the greatest place to work because we're downsizing so bad. But he's Osler. He'll be fine. And like me, he'll be 80 before long. Yeah.
Bruce, if you don't mind, I'll follow up with that. There's certain things that you mentioned about Jim and Osler and Scott, just different people that you're around. To the young journalists who might want to follow in your footsteps or get a job like you have had, would you tell them, but more than anything, you got to be yourself. And if you are funny inside, go ahead and be a little humorous without picking on the players or the coaches or the managers. But if there are funny situations, to thyself be true, right? How much of that was a part of your early journalistic career to where you could argue with an editor or somebody to say, I'm writing the way I write, versus the way that you want me to sound. This is the way I saw it. You have to trust me. What part of that is your experience, and how would you recommend advising a young person who sees this, who may consider it as a part of what they would like to do in their career at life?
Yeah, I tell young people kind of what I did is that when you start out, don't try to knock down any doors except the one that says you can't write, because that you can write, prove that you can write well, that you get what you're seeing. It's perceptive and observant. Don't try to be a comedian or come out with an opinion that might instantly turn people off to you. Just establish yourself as a writer, and as you grow into yourself and want to be more of yourself, it'll come out. And maybe it won't. Maybe you're just going to be a straight ahead writer, and don't worry about that. A lot of people like that have been very, very successful because they're just so thorough and professional. But if you've got humor or sarcasm or anything a little bit different always works if it's good. It doesn't work in music if it's horrible, but it sure does if it's good. And just be careful. I had a great example. A young friend of ours out here on the coast who got a job with Surford Magazine website, and I said, just show you can write first. Don't get cute. And he didn't. He established himself, and little by little he started throwing out lines that showed that there's a real wit there, or there's a real understanding. He did it exactly right, to the point where he was establishing himself as a guy who could write, and he's a keeper. And I think that's how you do it. When you interview, of course, people even interview for jobs anymore in person? You talked to an AI guy the other day.
The way we're doing it right now.
Yeah, I know. Don't pronounce yourself as, I'm going to blow the doors off this town. You just watch. You hire me, and you'll see. I've known people who did that, and they never did get a job. But anyway, just be cool. Trust yourself. Always trust yourself. And if you keep the job, you're going to be able to be yourself because they trust you. But they have to trust you first.
talk a little bit about the difference between an opinion type of a story versus just being the reporter and give me just the facts, ma'am, just like Jack Webb would say on Dragnet.
Well, that's where I, following Gammon's footsteps and a few other guys around the country, got across that barrier where it wasn't like, and in a move that suggested that the manager would be fired, preferably by Tuesday. It wasn't like that, but there were strong suggestions that they can't see this guy hitting 140 much longer. You know, it just maybe even say it just like that. I mean, there's a really fine line between, well, you're just a jerk, or you're seeing things that you have to feel like. I always felt like if I write something that's opinionated in a game story, I want the majority of readers to agree with me. Yeah, I'm not out there to make waves or be Mr. Controversial and everybody's writing letters to the editor. No. I want to be trusted by the readers, even if nobody writes, you know, because I just want them to think, yeah, that's kind of what I saw. And I want people to read me or some of these other guys where they saw the game, but now they're reading this account and they're seeing it differently. They're seeing it more thoroughly. They're seeing it in more detail. That was my whole thing. It still is. And I think if you can do that, and if you really want to be a columnist, which I never did, but if you really want to be a columnist, let some of that slip in. They're going to start putting your column signature on your, and you'll be a columnist. But I never. I used to look at Lowell Cohn and Glenn Dickey. Go, I'm not going to do that. I love beat writing. You know, they kind of handed it to me, but when they did, I didn't turn into those guys in terms of being, you know, super loud and controversial and had all kinds of readership. But I knew I had my readers, and I was happy just trying to make sense instead of chaos.
There's so much there that I'd like to follow up with. There's a difference between, as a reporter, someone who says, we should have made a change in the lineup, versus the manager going, I have to give this guy a full inning regardless. He has to get through, even if we lose the ball game. He has to learn to win when he gets into trouble and get himself out of that. There's an ability to be able to express that with, hey, we lost another game and the manager needs to be fired and that relief pitcher has got to go. There's an understanding of that. And there's also the George Steinbrenner aspect where you throw in, George didn't care whatever you said about the Yankees, just as long as you talked about him. I want to read about the Yankees in the paper. So there's a different philosophy. How does that mesh with you?
Yeah, well, there's an art to the interview as well. Sometimes you'll be in an interview room or a bunch of writers talking to the manager, and all these innocuous questions come up, and gee, you sure got a good eighth inning out of Hargesheimer there. They lost 18-1, you know,
Right.
Or a subject might come up, but nobody will hear it, and the next question will be completely off of that. Especially in large rooms, that used to drive me crazy in tennis, where you could have Venus Williams saying, it's right about the time I considered maybe even ending my life. It was that bad. And the next question is, in the fourth set, you tried it backhand down the line. I wanted to bring out a machine gun. I swear to God, I want to open fire on people. It was so friggin' stupid. But you need to be able to ask that question in a room, hopefully full of other writers who kind of get it, and get it to the level where you can get the manager explaining what you'd like to say, but he's saying it, and it's candid and it resonates with people.
Yeah. And you build trust, maybe not with Bill Belichick, because Bill's just going to give you that
he's gone
gravelly voice that doesn't have, it's so monotone, and he's just getting through this and on to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
On to Cincinnati. Versus the other coach that's going, if you understand what I'm telling you, and you can figure this out, then I'll connect with you in that way. But he's not directly answering the question, but he's going off in a tangent, and you have the ability to be able to understand that. You've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, and when you get somebody like Belichick who's just a stonewall, it's hopeless. You know, from all that I know,
I'll have my girlfriend answer the question for you.
Yeah, but it's a process where you build the trust. We got to the point where with Billy Martin, especially, and Bruce Bochy, where he kind of got us and we got him, and we could ask him pretty much anything. And he knew that we weren't going to turn it into a big, turn the town upside down kind of thing. And he'd get a little more frank with us. You know, he was not nearly as boring as he came off. But just these little things that's a fun part of covering teams is finding a good groove with you and the manager, and the players too, all of the players. There is kind of an art to it. Some are better than other. I learned from some of the best, Glenn Schwartz and Ron Bergman and Ralph Wiley and
Ron Bergman.
Yeah, Ron Bergman, he was the best. He could ask anybody anytime, anything at any time, and he had so much respect. Like he could just say, "Well, how the hell did you throw that pitch there after a brutal loss?" But they look at him and go, "Fuck, Ron." I mean, well, I'll tell you. I mean, but come on, man.
Well, I had a couple. First of all, Dusty Baker, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah,
he was easy to interview. He would ask you questions.
That's right. Yeah,
he was inquisitive.
Yeah.
Then there was Art Howe. I once made the mistake of doing a follow-up question. This is the first time I've ever in a press conference scenario with Art Howe, and he just kind of looked at me, and I later heard it from my editor, like it got back, like you're causing problems at the Coliseum with Art Howe. And then lastly, you talk about, it's 18-1. How's the bullpen going? I go up to Jeff Kent and I said, "Hey, Jeff, you look like you were swinging the bat well today." And he goes, "That's a horse manure question."
Yeah, yeah.
But you are now doing these wonderful, and you've been doing it for years, these wonderful baseball interviews with one of my favorite people, Marty Laurie. And so that must be an awful lot of fun. You're still doing it. Talk about the great Marty Laurie. Harper, let me give you a little, if you don't know who Marty Laurie is, he was a defense lawyer from Miami who decided to give up defending murderers and moved to San Francisco and start up a radio show in which he sold his own airtime. He was good enough to be able to sell airtime, and he was so good that eventually he was hired as a regular member of the media. And now he's probably the most popular sports personality at KNBR. Bruce and Marty are longtime friends. I've known Marty forever. He was very helpful to me especially when I wrote Barry Bonds' Baseball Superman and subsequent books. The great Marty Laurie. Speak to that man.
Oh man, he's truly amazing. By the way, there's a great documentary on him called A Baseball Mensch, M-E-N-S-C-H, a great word from the Hebrew. He's a mensch, but that's worth seeing. But he basically built a career post law by getting a credential and interviewing people and finding that people wanted to talk to him because he asked good questions and he knew about the people ahead of time. And now he has a library of all the people he interviewed. You mentioned anybody. I don't think he interviewed Rogers Hornsby, but maybe he did. I mean,
you batted .424 last year, Rogers. Where are we going to go this year?
And I joke on the air. It's like, remember Marty after Ruth hit his 60th homer, how we hashed that out in the bar afterward because we're both old guys who know a lot of history. I've immersed myself in baseball history. I've gone through the Encyclopedia of Baseball, every single page, like 30 times, just to learn more about people. And he's that same guy. So we get into that. But he's extremely current and he's very candid about the Giants. He wants them to win because he knows them and he's around them. But if they're not going good, he'll tell you what he thinks they should do. And it's always pretty engaging. I'm so grateful that he's having me on all these years, once a week now. And because he's just he's a youthful cat for his age, and he loves baseball in a way that is not obnoxious or gushing or overbearing. He just really knows it, and the more you're around him, the more he blows you away with that.
Best interview ever, Marty Laurie, a Sunday. Gary Hughes, who I've known since I was 14 years old.
Yeah, I know him well.
He used to coach Marin Catholic High when I was at Redwood. Later became a very, very well-known scout and almost a general manager. So this is about 10 years ago, maybe more. Gary Hughes. Gary, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing great, Marty. I just came back from Mass. And Marty says, "Oh, I didn't realize that there's any Catholic churches near Pac Bell Park." And he goes, "Oh, no, we didn't do it in church. Vin Scully ran a Latin mass in the Dodgers clubhouse. Dominant demon.
First one you can have, yeah.
I mean, Vin Scully doing Latin mass. I mean,
Oh, that's so perfect.
That says everything you need to know about Vin Scully, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you grew up with listening to this guy.
Oh my goodness, yeah. One summer I had mononucleosis. I was about 14, I think, and I was kind of bedridden the whole summer, and I just listened to the Dodgers.
That's exactly like the story I just said about Murray being in bed and listening to it.
Yeah. But to me, listening to the Dodgers, that was already in place. But my mom was doting on me, and she noticed that Vin Scully was always beyond, and she started just sitting down and listening to him. And after a couple of years later, she goes, that man taught me baseball. I've never met him, but he's lyrical. He tells stories. He talks about the other guys, not just your guy. He's so far and away the best. And I revere the likes of Jack Buck and Ernie Harwell. And there's so many of them. But Vince Scully, man, he was different. And to have him as the voice of your team, talk about a big influence. Oh my goodness, huge. And then you get to meet him, and he's like, "How's Martha? Is Molly still at Oregon?" It's like, "What? We haven't seen you in a year." Just the pinnacle of humanity, fine humanity.
I am walking out of Pac Bell Park. It's in the summer, but it's kind of a cold, foggy San Francisco day, and I'm by myself. And I just kind of look at the weather. Oh, it's raining a little bit, and I go, "Coldest winter I ever spent." And from behind, a voice goes, "Was a summer in San Francisco."
And the pitcher that night,
Scully, finished my sentence in the parking lot at Pac Bell Park, quoting Mark Twain. Now,
so
that's
perfect.
the highlight of my life, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and again, the way that he approached the game and everything about it, and personal stuff about the players. And with no pitch clock, you had time to explain yourself between pitches, which I like it better now. But the way he talked about Hank Aaron and Clemente and Mays in reverential terms, or just somebody like if Phil Garner, the way this guy plays second base, you really should take note of what a tough guy this is and how he takes hits. And then you talk to him, and he's like the nicest guy and stuff like that. It's just fantastic. He cared about everything and everybody, and he brought as much as he could to the airwaves. Very hard to do. Very hard not to bomb. Very hard not to just bore people. And of course, his voice and the way that he talked, like you say, didn't hurt any.
Well, okay, I have to throw this story in because this is another Scully almost being like the Pope. So I'm at USC. I'm with my friends Terry Marks and Chris Wildermuth. We're driving surface streets to Dodger Stadium, where I think it's where Figueroa meets Sunset, and you take a left. There's pre-game traffic, and Chris is driving, and he's got to be aggressive, and he pulls out onto Sunset. He looks behind, and he goes, "Oh my God, I just cut off Vin Scully." Harry and I are looking behind, and there's Vin Scully, and we're trying to sort of convey with our hands and our faces, "We're sorry. We would not have cut you off if we knew it was Vin Scully." I swear to Christmas, Bruce, he gave us the sign of the cross. He absolved us of our sins.
It's just so quick, It's just so quick. Yeah.
It's Vin Scully. It was just
unbelievable.
Beautiful. Oh,
yeah,
wow, that was beautiful.
I don't know why this applies, but it reminded me of a Billy Martin story. We got so in with Billy, and he trusted us so much that one time the three of us, in those days, there's 4 writers covering the team, right? But it's me and Glenn Schwartz and Kit Steer driving out of a spring training game. We're heading back to the Mesa to Scottsdale, and a car pulls up next to us, and there's a guy like this. You can't, in the passenger seat, you can't really see his head. All of a sudden, he's like, "This fucking Billy Martin." He's just, and then he's like laughing his head off and soar away. It's like, it's just so. That's how deep you can get with somebody, Well, so
when I pitched, I was a minor league pitcher, Bruce, but I got called up to pitch one major league spring training exhibition game.
All right.
The A's against the Giants. There were 5 Hall of Famers involved in this game, including Ricky Henderson, Frank Robinson, Bill King, Lon Simmons, and the manager of my team was Billy Martin. He never said a word to me or anybody. He was completely hungover from a night at the Pink Pony, and he and Al Fowler were sleeping on each other's shoulders in the corner of the dugout. Manager of a Major League Baseball team. That was Billy Martin.
Yeah. I went to a game in Texas one time, and every time the A's went to Texas, he'd go visit Mickey Mantle on his ranch, well outside of Arlington. And he and the Mick are drinking buddies, God knows, from the Yankee days. And but now it's like 10 after 7, and Billy's nowhere to be seen. And Jackie Moore, who's his bench coach, says, I guess I'm going to have to manage this game tonight. And Billy eventually showed up. It's like, of course, we had to write that. It was clear as day. But geez, Billy, I mean, but and he just when he was on a roll, all of that seemed okay. When they got into the playoffs against Kansas City, in the mini playoffs, the 81, there was a strike. This division winner against the second half. A's Kansas City, they're in the playoffs, and we're in Kansas City. It's game day, game 1. Glenn Schwartz and I are walking by the hotel bar midday, and Billy Martin's in there having one. He's like, "Hey, come on here." I said, "Just have one with me." That's okay, Billy. We're good, but I mean, this guy. I mean, they won the game and they swept the Royals. Just amazing stuff. I wouldn't recommend it, but
you guys mentioned the Vin Scully part about the historical aspects of him. I remember every game started on a glorious evening here at Dodger Stadium, and he'd talk about the sunset, and you could see it in your mind's eye because he would paint the picture in that way. He'd also have a moment in the 3rd inning where not a whole lot is going on, and there's 2 outs, and let's just say back then when I was Ron Say was at the plate, and here comes a 2-1 low and away. And that reminds me of Roy Campanella telling Sandy Koufax back, and they start telling the story, and then he has to pause it and say he hits a foul ball. It's now 2-2, and then here comes the slider. And Vin, I don't care about the slider anymore. Finish the story about Koufax and Campanella. And that's the part where I learned to realize that his ability to tell the story in a manner where it was interesting, in spite of other things that are going on in the ballgame, and for him to dissect it into 2 separate components, but yet do it so masterfully because he brings them together and say hits one into right center field for a single. Now I'm happy because I get to hear the rest of the story and the inning's not over.
You're on 2 threads with this guy. And, he came from the 1920s. He came from the New York Giants. He came from Mel Ott. Mel Ott was his guy. But he usually wouldn't go back that far because not everyone in the audience was, 68 years old. I mean, they wouldn't know what he's talking about. But Campanella, that was just fresh enough. He never played in L.A., but he was a celebrated figure. He had such perfect, exquisite taste, Vin Scully, that I never remember thinking, what's he going? Where's he going with this? Never did I think that. Yeah.
Well, just a classic and all that. And obviously you're writing too. If you don't mind, Bruce, we can talk a little bit. Nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. I mean, congratulations first and foremost. And is there an aspect of before you click send, when you put a story through, do you ask yourself, did I accomplish the who, what, when, where, why? Is this my best work? Is this something that I would be proud to read? Should I change this one sentence or a couple of words from a vocabulary perspective? How do you cross-check yourself before you end up delivering a story that is going to be in tomorrow's paper?
Well, that last point you make is really important to me. Like, I don't want to write a phrase that everyone else is using all the time. Well, he sure was Johnny on the spot there. I don't want to do that. You've heard that already. Yeah. And I'd go through my copy to make sure I didn't do that. I've especially these days when my memory's getting a little bit fading, I'll read over my stuff several times and I'll catch stuff. It's not so much I always feel like I did my best. I never feel like I'm mailing it in, but I want to know that it reads okay, that they're not going to say, well, you're wrong there, factually, that's that sort of thing. It's just a level of never wanting to make a reader think he think he's taking the day off. Right? I never they felt that, but I mean, I never wanted to be portrayed in that way.
Talk about the ease or the difficulty of just reporting what happened, but being able to explain it in a way where it is clear to the reader as it is for you. That's not always easy to do, right? It could be a one sentence omission of, well, how did they get 2 outs? Because you said it was a 2-out rally. Is it important to know that? It may be in some occasions because the momentum changed or there was some other portion of the story. For you to be able to add that, but not turn it into a 5-page story, it's still got to be, within a certain number of words. What's that magic formula like for you?
It's kind of the one thing I can do. I mentioned I've never done anything else. And it's so my dad once said, I was writing the book about him. He talked to an interview and said, arranging seemed easy to me. Now, you're talking about 40 different pieces of an orchestra. What's the oboe doing? What's the first, what violin, the trumpet, what's everyone doing? That came easy to him. This thing you're talking about comes very easily to me. I'm very fast. Yeah. And that's just what I do. I don't think I can do anything else, actually. So don't ask me to do don't ask me to get some other job. I can do that. And that's that's all I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And do it while you have. What are you doing now? Tell us, give us an idea. Well, what keeps you busy? You said, with podcasts and getting together with others, is that something that floats your boat now?
Well, I'm writing a factually inaccurate story about the Warriors right now.
How about that? Okay.
Harper and Steve, I've really gotten into women's basketball quite a bit with my wife as well. We really enjoy it. It's never going to be the men's game. It's never going to be something spectacularly athletic. They're all kind of doing the same. When I say they, that sounds too general, but they're all great dribblers and they pass great and they think team and they hit the 3-pointer. They do everything you ask. They don't just do something that's just like, what happened there? His head was above the backboard, stuff like that. But that doesn't matter to me. The people, and you get to know the people involved in the WNBA. Such fascinating people. Usually 4 years in college, well-spoken. They've got their post-career charted out. They're fascinating people, and the interactions they have, how the machinations of the team, the Valkyries team here in the Bay Area is a completely magical story. They make the playoffs with a bunch of players most fans had never heard of, but they knew they had credibility, and that's just something I've enjoyed writing about. It's funny because I have a Sunday column, Sunday print. Well, the deadline, Steve, for my Sunday print is Friday at 3:00.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Used to be Saturday at midnight or maybe even 1 a.m. if they're really stressing it. Friday at 3. So a couple of years ago when the Warriors won the title, Steph Curry had an epic Game 4 against the Celtics. It's one of his 5 greatest games ever. It's just like, God, did you see that? And they wound up putting the whole thing. And I that happened after my deadline. So now here comes Sunday, and I'm writing about, I think this kid Wiseman has a future. And people are going, did you even see the game? But that deadline is bust me in the head.
Yeah.
Like right now, I can't write about the Giants really because there's Friday and Saturday to account. What if I'm writing about is no longer valid? And Warriors too. So that's why I've written a lot about women's basketball because there's a lot more there. But I like to do historical stuff on occasion, but I don't want to be this guy who's like, I'll tell you what. Now, 1960, that was a year, my friends. I don't want to do. And you're like, Steve, you know what I'm talking about.
David Johnson was rounding for going for the.
A lot of that, I do feel a lot of that it was at its best at the 60s, but everybody feels like that. They feel like that about the 80s or the 90s, depending how old they are. But I don't want to be that guy. So, and it's just one a week, Harper. God, it's so breezy. It's wonderful. Retirement has treated me really well.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it for obvious reasons. Any other books that you're planning on, or you've written about your father? You've written the North Shore, the Pete Newell book. Is there anything that you would kind of light your fire and get you going?
Well, Steve Ketman, a local publisher, Wellstone Books, wants me to do something, and he wants Oslo to do the same thing about your 50 or so greatest moments you remember in sports writing. And it wouldn't just be, Will Clark singled up the middle or the Super Bowl. It's things that got you to your heart. I'm kind of intrigued by that. I'm starting to putting together a little list on that. And I'm also going through all my old columns and putting them together by sport just to leave something behind. The collections don't sell. I just like my kids can have this. This is what I did. It's all very organized. What I did is there. I'm wrapping that up right now, which is satisfying just to do it. I mean, it might get published someday. Maybe sports writing is giving eventually. Maybe AI is going to write everything. And people are nostalgic about sports writing, and maybe it'll sell then in 20 years.
Yeah, and it's all it is. It's going to be picking up things you wrote and appropriating them. That's all AI is. Someone wrote all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's in Google or it's in books or it's in magazines. That's all AI is.
Yeah.
It's great, smart, better than you sports writer. But I would say this, you were talking about advice for young writers. Here's my advice for young writers, because this is how I got started. And it was late. I didn't, I wasn't writing for my college newspaper. I was throwing complete games on Saturdays. I didn't have time.
Know it.
Yeah, but I would say two things. I'll say two things that I think will make you an interesting writer. One, high school sports, because you got to write on deadline and probably in very cramped conditions, and you have to really come up with something. And you also better be accurate, because the parents are keeping stats in the stands.
That's a lot of pressure right there, man.
Two, try screenwriting or stage writing. It's a very interesting process, but you're telling a story in a compactful way. And believe me, and I would actually throw in law school, which I did. That's a way to frame an argument. So those are my suggestions. I don't know about, just go to law school so you can learn how to write, but it does help.
No kidding. That's really good advice. I mean, covering high school is great in so many ways, because there's no greater pressure than an angry parent, right? And you screwed it up. He scored 4 touchdowns. He missed the last one. What were you writing in the fourth quarter? And it's just great training. And I really believe in moving up the ladder. A lot of writers right now, you didn't hear of them on Tuesday, and on Friday they're covering an A's game or some such thing. I mean, I don't know who for, come to think of it, but it's just what I really believe in what you said there, because there is I just think you grow from all these things, and accuracy is the main thing. I find myself lately writing something that I remembered it wrong, and I'll go to Google. I'll go just to check. Son of a, I had that wrong, or maybe the desk will say that's not right. And you go, man, this memory thing is for real.
Bruce, it's not just memory. I watch, we're doing Take 5 with Steven Travers. I watch a lot of this show. I watch a lot of it. And I can't tell you how many mistakes I made where I'm calling the Philadelphia A's the Phillies. And these aren't, isn't because I don't know it or I just remember it, but
right.
I'm speaking fast and I make a lot of errors.
Yeah.
And that's just humanity, and so I guess I'm perjuring myself, but
I really have to.
First one to admit it.
Yeah, I have to reread all the texts and emails I send to people, because I'm trying to get it out, and I'll leave out just a crucial word, or I'll have that that's not how you spell it, or so you got the double checking is the key to all life, when we really all the way through. Don't ever think that, oh man, that's great, that's gone, I'm ready, it's first take, all good. That's keep at it, keep making it better. I'm a big tinkerer with stuff. Tinkering is the key to all life, I think.
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell.
A text I wrote to a friend the other day who said that there was a certain player that wasn't in the lineup for the opposing team, and I go, oh, he's not hitting anyways, and I sent it, and then I went and looked at him. The guy's hitting 355, and he's having a great first couple weeks of the season, and I literally had to say, sorry about that. I needed to double check and realize I'm an idiot. I don't know what I was saying, because this guy was tearing it up.
Steve, I'm going to have to go look up your record of stamp at SC. I know it was great. I mean, I loved the Bovard Field, and Freddie Lynn and Bill Seinsoth, and all the legends of USC baseball.
Well, I actually didn't play at SC.
I thought you did.
No, I graduated from SC.
Okay, well,
and I got some graduate, and I did graduate work there. I was very lucky to get a scholarship to the University of Nevada.
Okay.
That's where I actually pitched very well. And from there, I signed with the Cardinals and also played in the A's organization. And after a few years in the minor leagues, and I was out of baseball and I had an injury and went back to school. That's when I went to SC. I was there for 2 years. I was a graduate assistant under Dato, coached the JV baseball team.
Okay.
And obviously I wanted to go there from my earliest youth. And, I played on this incredible high school team at Redwood. Half my team got scholarships to USC and Stanford and Cal and Santa Monica Junior College. Because all these other guys were overshadowing me, and so I didn't get the chance to go to SC. But eventually I graduated and wrote about it and have a great love for it.
Well, it's a good thing I didn't write. I was talking to Steve Travers the other day. Great career at SC. Well, no, not exactly. No, but
many media, especially when I was writing many books, and many people just assumed that I played for the Trojans. In fact, even one time, my dad goes, "You're a liar." Because the writer had said, Steve Travers, a former Trojan great. And I heard that, and I cringed because I know my dad is a stickler for the truth. And, I couldn't convince him, Dad, I didn't tell him that I played at USC. I just graduated from there, and he assumed, just like you just did. Yeah. So I'm setting the record straight now. But, hey, the Nevada Wolfpack, I've interviewed several of my teammates from Reno on this show, and it was 2 of the best years of my life. It was just fantastic. So,
did you play for Al Andrus?
I played for the great Al Andrus.
A roommate of mine at Cal, Scott Murphy, pitched for Al Andrus in the.
Oh, sure, I know Scott Murphy.
Yeah, good friend of mine. Yeah.
Did you know Del Youngblood, an assistant coach at Cal?
Just a little bit. It was a little bit later.
He was my coach in Reno. I owe him a lot. He gave me. I had no scholarship, and I wasn't sure if I was going. I'd kind of let down academically, and he gave me a scholarship to play for Nevada, and I went like 9-1, 9-2, and got us into the NCAAs. We'd never been there, and it was a great year for me, and so I owe him a lot. He's not with us anymore, but I know what it's like to be an underdog and fight your way, from out of the trenches, as Harrison Ford once said of John Milius, to get whether it's in sports or, I came out of nowhere to become a writer. I was 35 years old before I got paid to do anything as a writer. I just had to, but I had the passion for it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I should mention, you're talking about influences at Cal. A huge influence for me was that I went to Marin County way more often than the city because of Scott Murphy, the Sons of Champlain, and Huey Lewis, and Quicksilver.
Oh my God, yeah.
In River City, all these little nightclubs in San Anselmo, and
Fairfax Pavilion.
Yeah, I lived for that stuff, and I spent, and I wound up living in Corte Madera for 10 years. I just really took to Marin. At 74 to 84.
Bill King announced my game against the Giants in 82. And I call up my dad and a couple of my Redwood friends. You have to listen to the A's broadcast. I'm pitching innings 4 through 7 at Phoenix Municipal. And Bill King, he goes, Steve Travers, lanky right-hander who pitched the glory days of Redwood under Al Andrus, is coming in. The Redwood Giants won a national championship and a couple of North Coast section titles, and Travers was a big. And my dad goes, Bill King knows everything about you. And I assume it was because he lived in Sausalito and he read the Marin IJ and probably was reading all about high school sports, and he remembered me. And some people listened to that. I told him years later when I interviewed him, man, you knew all about me.
How great you have that. You've got that broadcast, right? You've got the whole 3 innings.
I wish I had the broadcast. And I'll tell you another one. I broadcast Bill Spaceman Lee breaking the all-time record as a 64-year-old professional pitcher for the San Rafael Pacifics in 2012. Bruce McGowan did play-by-play, and I was his color man. And I can't find the broadcast. It's on the Dominican University system.
Oh yeah.
I've been reaching out. If you happen to have any pull in that area, I'd sure love to get that broadcast. But I don't have Bill King's broadcast from '82 either. I would dearly love to have that. These are the
so much of that stuff just got carelessly destroyed. It's like a lot of videos from networks and basketball games, and now they're done with it. Really?
That's why Harper and I are here bringing back nostalgia and bringing these days back.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, a lot of people are into it, and we're trying to build our brand that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I know that we didn't get back to the 20s quite, but
I kind of did, because we talked about Murray writing to Amon de Calera. But Bruce, when you're on Take 5 with Steve Travers, you're going to be on a deep dive. That's where we go.
There you go. Yeah. I'll get my scuba gear just in case.
Absolutely. I know you have it out at Mavericks.
Yeah, not me.
Yeah. Well, listen, Bruce, we've taken up a lot of your time. Harper, are there any last thoughts that you want to offer here?
Well, just a thank you and a tribute to you, Bruce, for all that you've done to bring out the best from a Super Bowl, a World Cup, NBA Finals, Wimbledon's. We didn't even talk about your love of tennis and going to all of those, and World Series and different things that are part of, making it fun or making it easy for someone to learn a little bit about the sport through your eyes, and more importantly, through your words. And the games, there are so many of them, are all a little bit better because of your tender care and the way that you've treated it as it being important and a vital part of your life, as you make it a vital part of other people's lives as well. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. And I know the games are all better because people like you have taken the tender care to make it important from you to others. So my hat's off to you. I tip the old tributary hat.
Those are very kind words. Just to shake things up, I think I'm going to go down and rob a liquor store. You can contact me in the Slammer.
Yeah, like Andy Robinson and Dirty Harry.
Was it 5 or was it 6? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce, again, thank you so much for being a part of the show, and we'll end it on this. We just a Pulitzer Prize nominator. He's an author. He is a nomination, and he is not a nominator. What's the nominator? Did I literally just say that, guys? I said the numerator and the denominator. We're not talking about algebra or fractions right now. We're talking about a great guest that we had today. And thank you, Steven, for bringing Bruce Jenkins on to be a part of the show. The San Francisco Chronicle is all the better, and so are we, because of him and all that he's done to be a part of it. So we want to say thank you for tuning in, everybody. I'm Harper LeBel, along with Steven Travers. This has been Take 5 with Steven Travers. We want to say thank you for being a part of the 100 Yards of Football Network. If you like the show, please like and subscribe and tell a friend. In the meanwhile, have a fantastic rest of your day. We